let's see one more rule out of this Gemara. Kishkush b'shvit mishari v'aktiv v'ashvit yishmetenu m'tashtat yishmetenu m'kashkesh m'tashtam b'lesakel. So this is an interesting thing. What? Oh, sorry, I went back to page 2. I turned back. Yeah, I'm sorry. No, back to page 2. The Gemara continues. The Gemara seemed to say that kishkush is allowed, but then it says in the Gemara tishmetenu m'kashkesh m'tashtam b'lesakel. So make up your mind: is kishkush and sikul allowed or not? Amar Rav Ukva bar Chama tzoi kishkush havu chad avruye ilne v'chad satume file avruye ilan asur satume file shari. We're not going to go into details of what avruye ilan as opposed to satume file mean exactly, but the basic idea is that if it's something to save the plants, save the tree in this case, if the tree will be harmed, if abstaining from doing this will be detrimental to the tree, then you're allowed to do it. And if normally it would be done in order to encourage growth, then it's awesome.
So we're basically making an argument for just maintaining the status quo.
Correct. We're making an argument, exactly. We're making an argument for maintaining the status quo. Exactly. So we're going to have to define that. That will have to be carefully defined. Now, I'll ask already now. I'll ask already now. Why would this be? Why would you be allowed to do the avodah? I'm sorry, I'm skipping through the page because I'm debating what to do. Okay, I was debating what to do next. I decided to do next. Why would it be? Why would it be that the Torah would allow things that are? We're back to there. Sorry. I'm not making you guys. I just jumped up and down the unit for a moment.
To maintain the status quo, I think there are two.
Okay.
One is, I'm going to go out and say that Shmita is hard enough. If you come at the other end of Shmita behind any more than you are for other reasons, you're creating an additional burden that certainly doesn't seem to be one that should be indicated in the Torah.
Very good, and especially considering that these melachot are drabanan. So, Philip, how would you say that in one brief Arabic sentence? Right? One way of reading it is, right, when it comes to significant hefsed, Chazal back off, right?
And the other is the other side of the coin, what I said about
say.
Resting, it's fine. It shouldn't be in any way ending up worse than when you and then you started Shmita.
Right.
Clearly,
it's within the definition of melacha. This would not be maintenance is not considered melacha because you don't want to destroy the land, right? In other words, because when I say melacha, what I'm supposed to do is not create new growth, not encourage new growth, but maintaining the land's health, as Glenn keeps on saying, rightfully so, is that's that. I mean, Glenn takes the extreme and say that should be davka, be part of Shmita. I'm saying even if I don't go that far, still maintaining the health shouldn't negate the Shabbaton, right? At least we'll agree on that, right? So these are two ways of reading it. We're going to tell me, can you think of one simple nafkamina between the question of, is the idea of Chazal don't apply their gzeira if it'll be too much, it'll be too detrimental, or right, that's one, or that it's just not considered a melacha. Maintenance is not a melacha. Right, maintaining the status quo, making sure it doesn't die, is not a melacha. It's not, as far as Shmita is concerned, it's not a melacha. On Shabbos it would be a melacha, obviously, but can you give enough kamina?
I guess you could.
So right, the kamina would be pruning, which is doraita. So if I say it's a drabanan thing, that Chazal aren't going to go that far, but pruning is not Chazal. It's not up to Chazal. It's up to Hashem. If you wrote in the Torah. On the one hand. On the other hand, to make sure the tree doesn't die because the branches are going everywhere and it won't be able to maintain, right? That should be, that based on the second way we explained, that should be okay. Okay, good. That's a good enough kamina. We're going to see some more later on. But first, I want to have a look at the fundamental question of is this really Doraita or not, and then maybe I'll try to answer the question asked before. So the psukim in Shmot Kaf Gimel, right? V'ashvi d'shmetenu u'tashta. So Rashi writes a wonderful thing. Rashi on page 3, Rashi on the Torah, on there on Sefer Shmot writes, Tishmetenam avodah gmura, kigon charisha uzriya, u'ntashta mil zabel u'mil kashkesh. Sorry, in Rashi on page 3, top of the page. Rashi, yeah, not Rashi and the Gemara. Yeah. Rashi and Sefer Shmot. So, what is avodah gmura? Charisha uzriya. What are charisha and zohar? Why are they called avodah gmura? Because they're also midoraita, right? Okay. So in tashta is avodah she'inena gmura, right? Avodah that's not gmura, right? What does that mean? Drabanan. Wait. Hold on. So the Torah says you're not allowed to do melacha d'oraita or drabanan during Shmita, right? Right? You see how that's a bit strange. Right? The Torah says v'ashvi tishmetenu u'tashta. Says Rashi, tishmetena u'tashta. What does that mean? Right? What is included in tishmetena u'tashta? So Rashi says tishmetena is melacha d'oraita, u'tashta is melacha drabanan. So the Torah says you're not to do melachot drabanan. You see the right for the mathematicians amongst us, right? You see how that's a bit right paradoxical, right? Is if the Torah says you're not allowed to do right, the Torah says you're not allowed to do something that's something that's drabanan, so that's already included in the Torah itself, right? Torah, right? So, Beseder. The Ramban says this. The Ramban asked that question and says that you can't say that Zibul and Kishkush, which are Drabanan, you didn't read the Gemara. The Gemara says they're Drabanan. Now you yourself are also implying it's Drabanan. So if it's Drabanan, how can you say this is the Pshat of the Pasuk? Right? So the Maharal, I'll tell you what I think the Maharal is saying. The Maharal says there are some mitzvot, there are certain things that the Torah tells Chazal, I leave these things up to you. They are asur midoraita, but I leave them up to you. You know, the classic example the Gemara brings. Classic example where the Torah says something is asur, and you say, okay, what does that include? I'll leave it to Chazal, they'll decide. Chol HaMoed, correct. And it's interesting because here we're also more in Chol HaMoed, in Moed Katan, which is about Chol HaMoed. The Gemara, why? That's a bit different. Tov. I understand. I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but beseder, that's a bit different. I'm not going to go into the intricacies of why that's different at the moment. But the idea there, right, is Hashem said, you're not doing melacha in Chol HaMoed. They say, okay, what do you? Obviously not like Yom Tiv. So what is? What is it? So the Gemara says, the Torah left it up to Chazal to define exactly what's kalul and what isn't. That's why the Moed Katan is so complicated. And that's why most rabbis have trouble giving proper answers about Chol HaMoed. You're not doing Chol HaMoed, you're not, because the guidelines aren't as clear as they are on Shabbos or Yom Tov, or right, because they're more drabanan-ish, right? Even though they're doraita, you see what I'm saying? The Torah says you're not to do the melacha, but who defines what is and what isn't?
What is the melacha?
Right. What is melacha as far as Chol HaMoed is concerned? Right. Now here it's one step under, right? Here it's one step under because the Torah told Chazal to define what is Netisha. Now, once Chazal define, it remains Drabanan. That's the interesting thing. So the Torah told them, so I had a different example of this. There's a Reb Chaim on the Rambam. This is the way I explained the Reb Chaim on the Rambam. Regarding Pelisha Semuch Leveset. All right. I hope this isn't too, out there, right? There's the Isur of Nida, and the Torah says, "V'hizaltem et bnei Yisrael mitumatam." V'hizaltem et bnei Yisrael mitumatam, that you have to keep bnei Yisrael from doing these tumot, the aforementioned tumot. So Chazal have to create. So the way I read, the way Reb Chaim reads the Rambam, which is not the only way to read even Reb Chaim in the Rambam, but I think it's the truth in the Rambam. That because there's a real problem with the Rambam if you don't explain what I'm saying right now, and it's also just a nice thing that the Torah told Chazal, create a fence around the Isur. And that's why they created the Prishas Muklavesa, that you have to abstain also the day when the beginning of the menstruation is expected. You also have to abstain. Why? To keep you a step away. Now, is that Doraita or Drabanan? So in the Rambam, there's a stira, is a Doraita or Drabanan. So it's Doraita ordained, but the rules follow Drabanan rules. As we're Mekel B'Safek, all those things, they follow the Chazal, the way the Drabanan, the way a Drabanan din would work. You see what I'm saying? So the Torah says you have to create a fence. Right, Doraita, yes. Right.
The way to do it.
Right, are left to Chazal, correct.
But it's not normal. What's normal is that the
It's very rare.
tells you exactly what's supposed to do, but we created the Rabbanan fence around.
Right, but here the
But
Torah
you're
specifically
saying that
said to create a fence around it. And also when it comes to Shmita, the Torah says two things. First of all, Shnat Shabbaton Yel Haaretz, but only included 4 melachot. I'm going to get back to this and show it from that end too. Yeah, that's a different kind of fence. And also the Shmetena und Tashtag implies, Rashi understands, the Shmetena und Tashtag also implies this. Tishmetena is what I told you to do, and Untashta includes the other things as well. So, okay, so what does that imply? All right, that Chazal will have to figure out. So Hashem left it to Chazal to figure it out. Yeah. So that Chazal would derish the Torah, and their understanding is that this Betzem Moshe Sinai. It was up to us to discover what was part of that, but it really is totally Doraita. That's the difference.
Yes, it's only Doraita. The definition.
So they right, but here it says that Glenn also gave that example as well. But here it's more extreme, because here what we're saying is the Torah said do this. It didn't specify, and therefore the details follow Drabanan rules, not the Doraita rules.
Okay.
As opposed to by Shabbat, you might say it was up to Chazal to figure out what the melachot would be. Once they figured them out, they're legamer Doraita.
Okay.
You know, also for all intents and purposes. You see, that's why I'm having more trouble here than there. That's why it's like that's why this requires more elaboration, more explanation. Let's try to see the Rambam. The Rambam is going to blow your mind. The Rambam says like this. Rambam in Shmita Ve'Ovel Perek Aleph Halacha Aleph. Mitzvat naseh lishbot ma'avodat haaretz v'avodat ha'olam b'shana hashvi'it shene'emar v'shavta al Shabbat Hashem. So it says Shavta al Shabbat Hashem. So what do you have to do? You have to refrain from avodat haaretz v'avodat ha'olam. Which ones? Any. V'chol ha'oseh. I'm in the second line. Let's give it the second line. V'chol ha'oseh melacha. What is melacha? Melacha avodat haaretz. What is melacha? Melacha haaretz. בשנה זו ביטל מצוות עשה ועבר לא תעשה. That is the fun part. שנאמר, שדך לא תזרוק, עמך לא תזמור. Wait, what? We need שנאמר, right? The שדך לא תזרוק, עמך לא תזמור should imply that only זרע and זמירה, right? What you mean is, ביטל מצוות עשה ועבר לא תעשה, what לא תעשה? It's not clear what לא תעשה, right? What לא תעשה? Where does it say? Lo taseh always has to be where the Torah says, don't do something, right? Specifically, not tishbot, which is an aseh, right? Where does the Torah say, don't? Where in the Rambam, what passage does the Rambam bring to say there where the Torah says, don't? Only said chalit lakem chalit izmo, right? It's the only pasuk Rambam brings, right? So it says lo. So how does that include other melachot except for zriya and zmira? Not clear. All right, get back to that. Halacha bet. Eino lokeh min haTorah ela al zera ve'al zmira ve'al ktsira v'tzira. I mean, these four that the Gemara in Mot Katan said that only these four, you get malkot. But the Isur seems to imply all of them. Right? Following Rambam, the Rambam, only those four. Only those four you lokeh, but the Isur is on all, not on only four, on everything, because it says in the previous halacha. כל עושה מלאכה, what מלאכה? כל עושה מלאכה בעבודת הארץ.
Yes, the last is for.
Any מלאכה. So right, for lashes, right, lashes only for those four, but the Isur deoraita will apply to any. Zmira, then he copies the Gemara. It's not he missed the Gemara, because then he copies it over here. Zmira bichlal zriya in halacha gimel. Zmira bichlal zriya, b'tzira bichlal k'tzira. למה פרטן? לומר לך, שתי תולדות אלו בלבד הוא, what's the next word? חייב. He gets lashes only for these. שאר תולדות שבעבודת הארץ עם שאר אבות, שלא נתפרשו בעניין זה, אינו לוקה. Well, makat mardut, but that usually applies to drabanan things, not to doraita. So it sounds like the Rambam says all melachot are all the oraita, right? Elamai, some of lashes, some do, right? Sorry?
All melachot.
All melachot are doraita. Kol aseh melacha. Any melacha. Ma'avodat haaretz. He doesn't specify in halacha aleph. And the fact that in both halacha bet and gimel he keeps on emphasizing that the malkot are only for these really does clearly indicate that doraita is everything. It's only malkot only applies to these, right? So, but let's see the end of the parak. The end of the parak, the Rambam writes on page 4. The end of the parak, the Rambam writes, I'm going to read the first two, I'm going to apologize. I'm going to read Zayin Chet very, very fast. All right? Just to get a picture of what we're saying. סוכנת אילן בסקרה וטוען אותו באבנים ועודרים תחת הגפנים, מקשש וזיתים לעבוד אילן אסור, לסתום את הפצעים מותר, משקיעים את השלחים בשביל ויסדר הזריעה שצמאה ביותר וכאן שדה האילונות, הם מרוחקים זה מזה יותר מ10 ביצה, משכין את המים מאילן לאילן, לשקו את כל השדה, אם הם קרובים זה לזה 10 ביצה, משקיעים כל השדה בשבילן, וכן עפר הלבן, מרביצים אותו במים בשביל של האילונות שלי יפסדו, עושים נגוד לגפנים ועושים את המת המים לכתחילה, וממלאים את הנקיים מים. All right, so he goes through the drabanans and says, well, some of these are asur to save the place and to maintain the field. It's allowed. Fine. So that's these halachot. Mipnei mai tiru kol el. That's our question. Halacha yud. Mipnei mai tiru kol el. Why is this allowed? Shim lo yashke ta'asaretz melecha v'yamut kol etzer ba. Ho'il ve'isur advarim ha'elu v'chayotze be'em midivrehem. Since all of these are only drabanan, לא גזרו על אלו, שאין אסור מן התורה, אלא אותן שני אבות ושני תולדות. Wait, hold on. Right, in Halacha Yud he says, what's asur min Torah? Only the 4 that you get lashes for, right? This seems to contradict the first 3 halachot where he said, any melacha is asur midoraita, lashes, beseder. Lashes, different story, right? Seems to contradict that, right? So what's it going to be? So if you do anything else, that the right or drabanan. Okay, so Rav Kanievsky says that when the Rambam wrote in Halacha Aleph Melacha, he meant Charisha and Neti'ah specifically. Why? Charisha and Neti'ah specifically are not explicit in that pasuk, but they are Doraita. Why are they Doraita? Unit 6. But he says in Achinami, right? So there's the 4 that are enforced in the pasuk that you get malkot for. Charisha and Neti'ah specifically are Doraita, but you don't get malkot because they're not explicit in the pasuk, but they have their own whole story that we're going to learn in Unit 6. And then there's everything else is Drabanan. So that's the Rav Kanievsky. Aruch HaShulchan and Rav Kook have a different explanation. Have a look at Aruch HaShulchan. יראה לי דף על גב דמלכות ליקה, רק באלו 4 מלאכות, מכל מקום איסור עשה, יש בכל המלאכות. דהרי בקרא ושבתה הארץ נכללו כל המלאכות. וזה שאמרו, לקרא אסמכתא בעלמא, זהו מה שריבה תורת כהנים ללאווים. והנה הכוונה שרק מדרבנן אסורים האלה שמדרבנן יש גם איסור לאו, meaning, מדאורייתא, any work in the field is asur. Because it says, Shnat Shabbaton yel haaretz, or Shabbat la'Hashem, right? In other words, it's true that when it comes to the Malkot, you get only Malkot for those 4. The actual lav only applies to those 4. But any avodah in the Haaretz is all asur. So that's the way Aruch HaShulchan reads it. I'm gonna go deeper into this in a moment, and I want to say Rav Kook about that for a moment. Glenn remembers, I don't know if the rest of you remember, but Glenn remembers that once upon a time we learned about Mekach on Shabbos, about buying and selling on Shabbos. And we learned that buying and selling on Shabbos is only Asur Midrabanan. So really, Midoraita, you can have the market could be working the whole Shabbos, right? Yeah. You can have we're not going to go into all that. That's Unit 35 in Moreno and the Shabbos side of this. We're not going to go into all of that. That's the question to itself. I'm saying you can have the whole market work. You have an Eruv or closed city. You have a closed city, so you're allowed to carry. Don't write anything down. Weighing is Drabanan. Giving money, Drabanan. Muktzah, Drabanan. Right? So Mideoraita, the market could be working on Shabbos. You could have the mall open on Shabbos. Right? Just a second, Jonathan, just a second. You have the mall open on, you can have the mall open on Shabbos, right? Don't worry, I'm sure most of them are opening the mall on Shabbos anyway. You have the mall open on Shabbos, right? As long as you don't go Midoraita. So the whole problem is only Drabanan, says the Ramban. The Torah says, when the Torah says, no. What pasuk does he bring? Shabbaton. So there's a mitzvah of Shabbaton. Shabbaton means midoraita. You have to keep Shvut. The Rambam also brings that pasuk, by the way. Midoraita, you have to keep Shvut. And so everyone says, "What do you mean midoraita? You have to keep Shvut? What does that mean?" Chatam Sofer and others explain like this: you do a single transaction on Shabbos. If I buy one item from you on Shabbos, it's Isur Rabban. But if I'm running a store, that's Isur Doraita of Shabbaton. So, you see how that works? Yeah. That because you have to keep Shabbos. Because there's a certain level of Shabbos-tickness, I guess you can say, that's already transgression of Doraita. So when Chazal say now to buy on Shabbos, and that's Drabanan, we mean the single act. But when you turn it into the way you're running Shabbos or the way you're running your store, or etc., then so Rav Kook. So yeah, again, that's always a very big question how far to stretch that. But the answer is yes.
You can do it.
No. So it's Isur. So the Ramban says Isur Doraita. That's what I'm saying. Transgressing Ruach HaShabbat is against what the Torah is mitzvah. Shabbat is Shabbaton. Shabbat needs to be Shabbaton. Yes, Isur Doraita. Chiyuv Doraita to maintain, right. Exactly. Exactly. You're now to transgress Ruach HaShabbat, Shneimar Shabbat Shabbaton. You have a chiyuv to turn the Shabbat into Shabbaton. Right? So if you sell a single item, nothing happens. And Drabanan, yes. But if you have a market open, that's already a Doraita. The Rav Kook says the same thing here. Rav Kook says, or just a sec. I just want to finish this point in Rav Kook, and then I'll let you. So, Rav Kook says, when you do a single melacha, when you weed one weed out of your garden, that's Isur Drabanan. But if you spend the whole year weeding and doing, and that is the Doraita of Shnat Shabbaton Ya'aretz. So, now, what did I want to say about all of this? I'll finish this point and then I'll let you. I asked earlier, when Chazal have this whole very intricate limud of sabchalo v'kamechalo, right? And I asked like, why are you going to such intricacies to besachol tell me, yes, I want to expand the Isur Doraita beyond its limits. So expand the Isur Doraita. I don't. How much do I care about how you expand it in terms of how the pasuk reads it? If you have a simple, straightforward way of reading into the pasuk, fine. But if you don't, and then all the Rishonim are going to argue, what do you mean by this limud? It's a bit odd, right? Like, why are you being so intricate about something that you just want to add some more isurim, right? The direction the Maharal said, and I think that similar thing comes up in Rav Kook, that Hashem does expect Chazal to create a system that will be Shnat Shabbaton Yelaretz. Just like Hashem said by Chol HaMoed about that there's Shabbaton, but it's not Mikra Kodesh. So what is it? It's Chol HaMoed, right? That's why it's Shabbaton, but it's not Mikra Kodesh. So it's kind of in the middle. Okay, who will define that? Chazal will define it. Same too Chazal, Hashem said, I want Chazal to create that system. And since what Chazal are doing here, they're not just saying, I want to create another gzeira, I want to create another gader. Right? I want you to keep away from working the land too much. So I'm going to create a gzeira. Chazal is saying, I'm fulfilling my chiyuv to create that system. I think that's why they're so intricate. I think that's why they're going to say, and that's why we're also going to base it on the pasuk. Now, not properly, because really the pasuk doesn't mean that. Not properly because Hashem didn't tell me use this pasuk davka. So it's not adasof, so and remains drabanan. But by doing the limud by reading it into lo kol shebesalcha lo kol shekamecha, by that they were fulfilling Hashem's tzivui to create a system around the Shmita as well.